Hey, so I think it's half past the hour at this stage. So if it's all right, we will get started. We have we don't have anybody as of yet here physically apart from British. Um, but we have a few people who are attending in virtually. So for those of you who are connecting virtually, good morning, but more likely good evening and even good night. Um, so what we'll do is let me just do a quick walkthrough. Oh, sorry, I'm just being paged by the Steam. Okay, sure thing. So, can people just to check? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine online, Hugh.
Okay, great, good. So if if you can't, please just shout. All right. Okay. So if it's all right, let me just first of all do two slides just to explain how today's session is going to be organized. So this session is about the CODATA-RDA schools for research data science. We've started using a shorthand term for that because that's quite a mouthful, which is SWORDS, so School of Research Data Science. And today, what we're going to do is to try and provide a little bit of discussion of where we are, basically post-COVID. I know I'm pushing my luck a little bit by using that phrase, but let's say post-COVID. And in terms of where we are, in terms of the delivery of the teaching and the new challenges that we're facing. Particularly, this session today is very much about getting more feedback from the community in terms of how do we make what we do more sustainable. And we'll explain that. So today is not so much a discussion about the curriculum and those and sort of showing pictures of all the places that we've been, but more about, okay, how do we turn ourselves into something where we're not banging on doors every day trying to get funding for this. So if it's all right, we'll just move on to, oh, hang on, I've got control here. Oh yeah, good. So a few things just to note. Let me just pop into the chat. There is a shared document which I've just put into the chat on Zoom. So I'd be hugely grateful if you could do the standard deal and sign yourself in there. That document will also be using for discussion notes and so on. The goals for today is very much to provide an overview of the schools and to talk about our plans for growth. Then to discuss various sustainability models for the schools. And then finally, and this is I think the thing that's most important, is to get feedback on those various plans. So the agenda basically represents those goals. So in the first instance, Rob Quick, who's connecting remotely, will be talking about our present plans for just a brief background to the school, and then to talk about what are our models for growth and expansion. Then it'll come back to me. We'll discuss a set of possible sustainability models or funding models that we have. And to discuss, that's just to note that these are a set of possible plans. They're not exclusive plans. We'd be delighted to hear more ideas, but these seem to be the ones that we think are the plausible ones. We'll allow a 40-minute slot for discussion. So we'd really love to get your feedback, particularly talking about the sustainability models, what you think that they're. Please feel free to punch holes in them. Say, okay, what are your ideas on prioritizing them, and so on. And then what we'll do is at that stage, then we'll have a 10-minute summarization of the main points. Just to note, if it's okay, I will try and finish this session maybe a few minutes before the end of the 90-minute session, just to give us time to move on to the plenary session. All right. So at this point, if it's okay, what I'm going to do is just to hand over to Rob. Just give me a moment while what I'm going to do is just make sure that the team here can show up the slides. So Rob, I'll hand over to you, and we'll get your presentation up on the screen, if that's okay. Hang on.
Sounds good. Thanks, you. And I'll wait till I see the slides before I begin.
Okay, Rob, can you see that?
I can.
Okay, great. And just shout at me when you want. I've got the magic clicker for moving the slides. So over to you.
Okay. So yeah, real quickly, I'm going to go into just a very brief history of the school and some models for potential growth, or at least some high-level models of where we think we can go. And then Hugh will cap that off with looking at some of those models more in depth, and some of the progress that we've made and are planning to do in the near future. So you can go ahead to the next slide. And just as a reminder, the goal for these research data schools, or the SWORDS program, is to create communities that teach foundational data science skills to be able to basically leverage the 21st century research workforce. And it focuses on early career researchers in low and middle income countries, though we have also had some recent efforts that move into minority serving institutions or underserved communities within various countries also. So not only, while the focus is still on low and middle income countries, there's also a curriculum that is completely open and usable by other communities, including those that are underserved in high income nations or high income countries. So go ahead and move on, Hugh. So who are we? Really, overall, we're a volunteer network. These are the helpers, the instructors, the leadership team are all doing this voluntarily. We're skimming off the current salary and current responsibilities that we have, sometimes working outside of those responsibilities to make sure that this program continues. CODATA and RDA were the organizations that the discussions of these schools started in and have been key in pushing us forward. CODATA also provides some monetary funds, and RDA has always been a sponsor and helped with various different events. So both of them have also put in some financial resources, though not enough to really grow the program enough to help us sustain the program minimally. We have many partner organizations, including the World Academy of Sciences and the International Center of Theoretical Physics, who have always helped us with these programs and with the physical events. And then a network of funders that are really piecemeal. Certain funders fund certain programs, or certain students from certain areas of the world. It's really kind of putting a puzzle together to fund one of these events. Some local institutions have put forth most of the funds to do this, but we usually still are looking for additional funds to help these schools go more smoothly, including those volunteers and helping them with travel and expenses that they incur while being away. And then we have the local hosts, who are key to the organization, not only for the facilities and the equipment and the student base they provide, but for the financial funds they kick in to help these events happen. So you can move forward. And what do we do? I guess you can move forward there a little bit, Hugh.
Oh yeah, sorry, that was.
I didn't see the animations in these slides. I just I just saw the slide. So we do a series of physical schools, and to this point, those have been 2-week schools, or in a virtual environment, those end up being a 10-week program. Basically, there are 10 modules that go once per day in the physical schools, once per week in the virtual schools, to allow people to build them into their own lives. We have had 11 of these physical schools with 330 participants. We've had 3 of these virtual schools prior to now with 267 participants. We have an ongoing virtual school at the moment, and I don't think that's counted in these numbers. It may be, but I don't think that these numbers actually include the current ongoing school. Then we have a 3 half-day course that is specifically geared towards data stewards in institutions. We've held 9 of those events, many of them fully virtually, several of them in person also, with about 250 participants. And then we have an alumni network who continues the work, discussion, and activities beyond the end of the school, and brings together, they upkeep a lot of the mechanisms and have continual conversations and networking opportunities after the school ends. So you can move forward. So to talk about the reach and the value we've added, and you can see here a map. This interactive map is available at our website, and you can drill down and get a little more information from that. But we've run these schools either physically or virtually, and have high quality hands-on teaching for approximately 72 hours per school. We've had 600 and, sorry, this print is really small. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. More than 600 participants, and doing kind of a back of the envelope calculation. This has been, it has delivered over $600,000 worth of teaching effort. And we've run these on 5 continents, in Africa, Europe, Asia, South America, and Latin America, and Brisbane, and I think San Jose actually may count as North America, so it may actually be 6. I know I looked this up at one point, and the tectonic plate is very close to Panama, so I think that San Jose counts as North America. Not positive about that, but the data steward instructor training has been taught and been used on a MOOC, 9 continuing professional development hours to 244 participants. And all those attendees are not necessarily the early career researchers, but professionals in a data research environment. So you can move forward, Hugh. And so currently we do this with ad hoc funding and a lot of volunteer effort. We coordinate with the local organizers, and this is mostly done, this coordination step is done by the chairs and a local sponsor, or a local advocate who's helping us. We have some longer term from Springer support from Springer Nature, and there are several other small funders who give a sometimes per event funding sponsorship. We had some project support from Fairs Fair. We have a proposal currently in from NSF. That NSF proposal is mostly for curriculum development and for student participation in these courses. To give everyone an idea, that's a $250,000 a year proposal, but only about 0.3 FTE of effort. So only about a third of a person effort, and that third of a person is split amongst 3 people. So it's 10% of 3 people's time. So a $250,000 a year when you're paying also for student participation, which includes travel and lodging and stipends, doesn't come out to be much. And then we have an MOU with the African Open Science Platform. So you can move forward, Hugh. So we have 3 basic models of growth, and these are overviews. The heartbeat, which is really what we're functioning on right now. This keeps the schools going in a steady state, allows us to do 3 or 4 schools a year, and we can hold on to this pattern for as long as the co-chairs and the alumni believe that we can do it. So it's a nice way to start off a project, not necessarily a nice way to continue a project long term. And we have gotten some administrative support from RDA. And as I said, this will fund 3 to 4 schools a year, depending on the local institutions, whether those are virtual events or physical events, is up in the air. We actually have a pilot project that's going this fall in the southern U.S. that will be a hybrid where some of it's done virtually, and then we'll come together for a short period of time for an in-person meeting in the middle of the school and then at the end of the school again. So you can move forward, Hugh. There's a small growth scenario that allows limited expansion and gives us some flexibility with digital delivery and community development. This is administrative support, developer support for our presence online, and for interactive ways to interact with the school. It does some community management, a director. This would be somewhere in the 2.5 to 3 FTE total, and would help buy out the funds for the instructor plus a travel budget. Usually that travel budget would be more facing the instructors and the organizers than it would be for the participants. The participant travel budget is usually either we rely on the local institution or some model of institutional funding for the students. This is done really well through ICTP, as they have money specifically to bring in international students into Trieste for our yearly program. And this would be about 5 schools per year, with 1 additional school per year, which would make it approximately 5 per year, or 6 per year. And then there's the ambitious growth scenario, which is very similar to the small growth, except that it allows more bold expansion. It's about 5 FTE, which is a nice a nice amount of staff for a small project. And this would fund 6 schools per year and about 2 more per year, depending on the community demand. But even this caps out, especially if they're physical events, as to the number of these we can do. I think it would, even with 5 FTE, just fitting things in the calendar and organizing things, I think this 6 caps out at around 10 to 12, without a model that is has some independent delivery of the course that doesn't need necessarily our organization. So I think that's the, I have one more slide here that maybe I don't have another slide. I did add a few items to the slide that I wanted to cover. Uh, so the reality of the situation is that international funding for either of the growth options is difficult to come by. Scoping internationally is difficult as most of the funding sources we are used to dealing with are uh, are domestically focused or nationally focused rather than internationally focused. Um, and so, unless we have a patron or some set of patrons that have that international scope, and we find them, it's likely to continue in that heartbeat pattern and basically puzzling together various different funding methods. Um, so even if we stay in heartbeat method for a while, we are doing a lot of work to prepare for the future by grooming the next generation of CODATA and RDA school leadership. We've grown um, the co-chair group from 3 originally to 8 now. Of those 8, 4 of them have started the school as either students or instructors or um, have participated in a non-leadership role before moving into a leadership role. So I think that even if we're in the heartbeat mode for a little while longer, we are preparing to not be in that heartbeat mode. We're preparing for one of the models that allows us to expand. And I think I will wrap up there and turn it over to Hugh because I think I may have run a little long.
Don't worry. Thanks very much, Rob. Sorry that we lost your last slide there. Okay. Um, all right. So if it's okay, unless any, there are kind of immediate questions for, that might be asked, either physically or virtually, we'll move on to the next slot. I mean, if anybody doesn't look as if there's any sort of, if people want to just raise it, we're a small enough group here that if people want to jump in and ask questions, you're very welcome to do so, either physically or just throw a question in the chat as well. Otherwise, if it's okay, we'll switch over to the next talk, if that's okay. Okay, great. So Rob has sort of very nicely sort of set the scene in terms of here's our goal, this is what we can do, and the thing that's there, which is that basically that sort of bottleneck that we have in terms of, to perhaps one of the things we haven't sort of stressed here is the level of demand that's here. There's no shortage of demand in terms of people saying, yeah, we'd love to see more schools. We want you to deliver things. No shortage of demand with likewise the data steward instructor training and so on. The key issue is the bottleneck. We'd like to, and hence there's those, Rob has explained the sort of different growth models that we'd like to get to. But as Rob has pointed out, that is, we're not at a point where we can just sort of keep things going as they are at the present moment. And indeed, I think there's that other key point, which is it very much depends right now on a relatively small cadre of people who are super enthusiastic, who meet 2 times a month, stay in touch all the time, and so on. So that's tenable only for a period of time. So what I'm going to do now is talk about a discrete set of models that we came up with in terms of building our sustainability. All right. Now, the thing to stress here, what we're going to do is outline these things. If you go to, just to stress, by the way, if you go to the page for this meeting, you'll find a link to a set of materials that you can look at. And in particular, there's one document which sort of explains these models in more detail, and it's there. So don't get too stressed if you're going, oh, there's a lot of detail here. The thing also to stress is that we see advantages and disadvantages with all of these approaches, and it's not as if we're looking at these approaches and saying we must only pick one particular pathway here. What we're trying to do is to say, okay, what are the things that it's more like, what are the approaches that we should be prioritizing here? Oh, thanks very much, Kevin. So, and what I'm going to do is just walk you through these particular these models. So we need to very much move beyond the situation where we're at, which is very much ad hoc funding for individual events, and getting to a point where we can enable those sort of growth models. And obviously for local organizers, what they want to see is sort of, okay, the actual delivery of the teaching. The thing that we're saying here is that actually, if we want to enable that growth, we need to sort of build up the support in terms of the team, a permanent team to support that, and also to make sure that instructors are having their expenses paid and so on, and actually a sort of an infrastructure at the back end to build these things up. But those are all things which are sort of not of interest to the student on the ground, the local organizers, and so on. And so let me move on to this point. So the first one is very much the thing that we've been working on so far, which is the idea of getting, like any sort of research project, that we get project level funding. Okay, and that's very much been the mainstay so far. It's something that we understand really well. If you know, don't want to blow our own horns, but it's something. We understand the landscape well here, as Rob has pointed out, and in particular, we see this sort of breaking down into basically 5 different classes. So we see cases of national funding. All right. So, for example, in the UK, you've got RC UK, in Germany, DFG, the US, NSF, NIH, and so on. Then you have supranational funding, so for example, European Union. And we've gotten funding in both of these sorts of cases here. Then we have charitable funding, so for example, Welcome, who've supported us, who provided some support for us over the years. And as I said, they tend to be kind of oriented towards the biomedical sort of situation, but not exclusively. Something that we look at closely is development-based funding. So in other words, funding that's specifically earmarked for developing low and middle income countries. So one thing that we look at closely is the US aid as one option, but they're obviously not the only sort of organizations that are on the ground there. And then finally, there's private funding and sponsorship. All right. So in terms of the pluses for that, people have very good understanding of how all of this works. All right. We know what we need to do, and once you have funding, that's fixed. It's good, and it runs for years. Thank you. On the other hand, there are disadvantages there. So in particular, we continually have to write proposals which match the requirements of the call. The funders are often sort of interested in discrete examples of discrete training. Again, they tend to say, well, show the delivery rather than the back end development. So talking about infrastructure kind of tends to lose the appeal. And also, we're obviously not the only people working in this area. So obviously there are things like the carpentries, there's open life sciences, and so on. And just to stress, I say competition, but obviously this is friendly competition. All right. Another potential model is one of additional support from CODATA national members. All right. So CODATA has a set. It's not just one organization based in Paris. It has multiple sort of national members across the globe. So in particular, CODATA have we've been moved from being a task group within CODATA to something which is organized much more, which is something which sort of only exists for a few years, to something which is really recognizing, yeah, this is a thing that CODATA is being involved. So the recognition for that is definitely there from CODATA, and certainly the national committees are interested in what SWORDS is doing. All right. So in particular, one of the things we're looking at here is to say this would not be a mechanism which would provide funding for 5 FTE, but it would, for example, you have a situation, for example, of national committees leading activities and providing their expertise. All right. Other things might also include, say, in-kind support would be another mechanism. So there, the positives are this would give a sort of a nice, CODATA see this as part of their activities, and it would be a direct way for the national members to support the uptake of these schools and to benefit from them. So CODATA have been working hard, and they'd get something back from it. The disadvantages is to note that, okay, like any other organization, they don't hold significant resources in and of themselves. In-kind support also would actually require more management. So, for example, the idea of one national member providing administrative support probably isn't tenable in that respect, because you need to have people who are sort of familiar with what's going on, I think is an important point to note there. Another model we've thought about is the idea of HEI or PO. So sorry, that's acronym soup. What I mean by that is higher education institutions or research performing organizations, okay? And the idea is that these kind of organizations would provide subscribe to what we're doing or just provide contributions. The model there is one of an annual subscription, all right? So these types of institutions would subscribe to this. And the point is that this would not just be done at organizations which are necessarily involved in terms of teaching, having these schools, but actually that this would be scattered globally. So you would have high-income countries, institutions from high-income countries being involved with this, as well as those from low and middle-income countries as well. And that the payments, the contributions would sort of be on a sliding scale, all right? So obviously high-income countries contribute more than the low-income countries. And those subscribers would provide some input in terms of ongoing curriculum development, which is a thing that's going on there. In terms of the advantages of that, for particularly high-income countries, that matches their CSR requirements, their corporate social responsibility types of statements. So, for example, my university at Royal Holloway has a statement about saying, okay, we want to do the right thing here, effectively. So that is matching that. You often see low and middle income institutions, and indeed historically disadvantaged institutions such as the one that Rob was talking about, may also see a positive in terms of being involved, being aligned with something which is very much a global initiative. All right, saying, oh yeah, we're involved in the teaching of this thing which many institutions are involved with. Disadvantages are that is it hard to sustain that. So put bluntly, if I am, an institution from a high-income country may put down a line item to say, oh yeah, we'll contribute $10,000 per annum to this project. But as that goes on over a few years, you can sort of unfortunately see a scenario where somebody comes back and sees this line item in the budget and then saying, "Oh, why are we contributing to this? This is not an idea that I had, so we'll drop that." And there's an issue there. The other point is the not invented here syndrome in terms of an institution X, particularly a high-income country which might, sort of regard itself as having a high reputation, saying, why are we contributing to something where the curriculum hasn't been developed? We're not the ones in charge. And the other one that's more the administrative side of this, is that institutions may have different quality assurance requirements in terms of how things are being taught, and hence we may be pushed in different directions in terms of saying, oh no, you have to cover this and you have to cover that and so on, and it becomes, okay, how do we keep that, how do we keep things in mind there? The next model, which I regard as the kind of the last of the most realistic sort of models, is the idea of direct participant charging. So in other words, all participants are paying. It's important to note, by the way, that different schools that we have, depending on how they're run, sometimes there are payments, sometimes there aren't. So at present moment, for example, the school that we run in Trieste, there is typically isn't a charge, although, and sometimes the ICTP, who've been the hosts, will actually pay for travel and so on. But there isn't a specific charge generally there. On the other hand, for other schools, there have been charges, usually fairly nominal sums. But here, so it's already a principle that we're not aligned to the idea of, oh, it has to be free all the time. So in that case, again, like the institutional level support, high-income countries, and for example, people attending on who are coming from companies, would pay substantially higher fees to subsidize low and middle income country students. Again, the advantages there is that there's that clear connection between delivery and funding, so that it's like you're paying so that this can help what's going on here. A key point, I think, in general, is actually to even if you don't see this as a model to support everything, is the idea that it reinforces participation. All right, so if you offer something completely for free, people have less skin in the game, effectively. So even if you sort of say to people, okay, I'm asking, even from a low-income country, if you're asking them to say pay a nominal fund, then you're saying, yeah, okay, I've contributed something, so I better get the most out of this. All right, and often students can go away and reach out to different sources and so on. Disadvantages there is that there's a potential tension between instructors. So if I am, for example, somebody who's been working on, if you have an instructor who says, well, I only want to work in high-income countries and so on, where everything is sort of nicely set up, then what's the, and as opposed to somebody who says, I want to work in a low-income, do teaching in a low-income country, there may potentially be tension there. And likewise, there's the point that once you're actually effectively asking for fees, then you also have to sort of say, okay, there are higher expectations from students. In other words, they're saying, well, is this a credit, or is this qualification, do I get a formal qualification associated with it? Do I have assessment? I want to have some form of assessment in there. And indeed, if I'm unhappy about a particular form of delivery, is that we have to introduce mechanisms for redress in terms of somebody kind of looking at the student experience role. In my life, working in a university, student experience takes up most of my time, to be brutally honest. The one other model that was also there, although this is kind of, none of us are really sure that this is a viable mode at all, is the idea of crowdfunding. Okay, so in that respect, there are lots of well-known platforms for providing crowdfunding. Go out and set up a Kickstarter or whatever. The disadvantages there are considerable. In particular, basically, it's a huge amount of work to get that to look around. It's a much harder task than you think. All right. Okay, so that's what the point is. That's where we are at the present moment. So at this stage, if it's all right, I think actually before I go any further, does anybody in the audience, the physical audience here? Oh yes, great. So just hang on. So for people who are attending physically, we'll just have a microphone. So if you can hang on for that. So if you just give your name and institution and so on, so people can hear, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Can you go back to the presentation?
Yeah.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
could we go back to the presentation? Sure.
You mentioned students, and
Yeah.
I can see the disadvantage for students, but what is the advantage? What could be an advantage for students?
Sure. Give me a moment just to pull out this slide for you. So,
One before, and it's actually related to the high amount of work for funding and the information load on students.
yeah.
So go back only one slide, and
This.
yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, you're saying, sorry, just to.
Students can leverage different sources.
Yeah. So, in other words, what in effect we're saying there is that students can, they can kind of look at their situation and say, okay, well, here's something that we're asking them to pay for. So then they can, it's in some respect going to them. They face that. They then are sort of like saying, okay, how do I cover X? Okay, I can reach out to my department for a certain amount of funding here. Maybe there's another fund that I can reach out to from my university and so on. So they can go and find, they can go and reach out to, the issue of funding then is sort of handed over to them. And as I said, you have a situation, particularly for a high income country, in some respect you can say, oh, okay, well, that's supported in terms of their project. Let me give a sort of a more concrete example of that. In the UK, we have things called doctoral training centres, so that basically, groups of the RC UK, Research UK, will pay for PhD students all working in one research area. And one of the things they earmark is a certain chunk of funding for training for every year. So they could say, oh yeah, that's what I would spend on for 1 year, for example. If you're at a low income country, then it's saying, okay, that you can get things which are more piecemeal, but correspondingly it would be a smaller sum of money that we're looking for, if that's okay.
Thank you.
No worries, that's great. Okay, good. So, are there any other questions here? Just trying to make sure that we've got everything. I don't see anything that's cropping up things. Okay, so again, just to note, we have the sign-up sheet that's there. If I can just ask the team, if possible, can you open up the document that I sent you? Yeah, that's.
So Hugh, I have a question on your presentation.
Sure thing, Rob.
And that's, you talked about competition between the instructors, and I wasn't quite sure where you were going there. We haven't seen that as of yet, but I am curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm sorry, Rob, I don't think I kind of explained that really well. I think the point I'm saying is this: suppose we have a situation where we're running schools which are being thought at for high income countries and for low income countries, and then if we're in a situation where we want to we're saying, okay, we want to buy out time for people, and we have a situation where one instructor is saying, look, I'm only willing to do teaching for at a high income country, and so I say, yeah, that's the only thing I want to do, and my time is covered for. And then it's sort of work is being sort of handed over to other people, for example, to say, oh, okay, I want to do things in a low income country, for example. That I think is now. Of course, I think, Rob, the good thing that we've had so far is that the instructor base that we have so far have always sort of been hugely responsible individuals who've never done that. But it's likewise kind of just looking at that situation, you know, that if we have a situation where we're kind of if we were completely dependent on, say, participant charging for the income stream, how do we make sort of clarify the situation and say to instructors, well, here are our expectations of you in terms of what's going on there. I'd say it's something that we can handle. It's more an issue of in terms of our selection for instructors for the future. It's something that we need to be more careful about, and to be when people sign up to be instructors, to sort of say, look, these are our expectations of you, if you see what I mean. I hope that that's sort of answering that question there.
Yeah, thank you. I just didn't quite see where you were going with it the first time through.
Yeah.
I do think that, you know, you're right. We've been incredibly lucky that everybody we've worked with so far has been very dedicated to the project, and we haven't had any tension that I have ever witnessed between instructors, and maybe imagining that is one of those things that we'll have to deal with. I would say that if there's someone who I don't think we'll have a shortage of instructors who, if we're able to pay for their time, effort, and travel to these events, will you know, if somebody is saying, I don't want to do one kind or another, then we find somebody who is willing to do that, and hopefully we pay at a competitive enough price that it's worthwhile, or at least people aren't, as we're doing now, aren't volunteering their time freely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Rob. Okay. So just in terms of the time that we have, I've actually just received just before I got started, we have to finish at 5 minutes before the hour to make sure that we can get to the plenaries and so on. So we're at I'm reading about 17 minutes past the hour. So I would suggest that we spend, say, if it's okay, maybe 25 minutes at this, or depending on the next phase is sort of handing over to you, the attendees, in terms of feedback on this. So what we've done here, if we could scroll down a little bit, please. Oh, great, thank you. And there's the thanks to whoever has been busily sort of filling out those notes. What we've done here is just in terms of discussion now, is to just kind of cover those different sustainability models, and it would be really good to, if people have time, to give us your feedback on those models. I know we've already been raising questions and so on, but it would be good if folks could have any sort of ideas, particularly just going through on those models. The thing also to stress is that if anybody, you know, in this either attending here or attending physically, sort of says, wait a minute, you haven't thought about X, then please say that. We're not, you know, this is our best shot, and kind of looking and scratching our heads. But if somebody sort of says, okay, there's something better that you haven't thought about, please raise that. So in that respect, the first thing to do is let's go back to the project funding one, which is, I think, the one that all of us are pretty familiar with. But does anybody have any sort of additional thoughts on what we're doing here with respect to that project funding model? Oh, and thank you, Liz, for taking the notes. Hey, Chris. Oh, hang on, sorry. And Christine, if you can introduce yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, Christine Kirkpatrick here, local in Seoul. Cooling down after a very hot and sweaty subway ride. So if you're like, wow, what happened to you, Christine? That was the subway ride, Rob. Maybe a small note. So I was reading some of the latest NSF calls, and I noticed in reading the one about REUs, which is how you typically get a summer coverage for students. There's something in there also about training K through 12 STEM instructors, and I didn't know if we could brainstorm a bit on how something like that might be compatible. You know, it wouldn't be a low and middle income country summer school, but we certainly have places that are under-resourced in our country, and we certainly have institutions, community colleges, or teaching colleges that are under-resourced. It might be interesting to put something regional together. I know Bonnie Carroll always wanted to do something in Appalachia. I didn't say that right, but so that's one thought there. It is hard though. It's chasing your tail to do the project funding, but I mean, unless we want to get entrepreneurial, and which is, none of us are in industry, right? Because it's not really our thing to do this. So it might be just the easiest way to keep going. But I have some other thoughts on some of the other types of funding, so I'll wait.
Okay, that's great. So Christine, just also to note, I mean, so Rob has sort of spearheaded one proposal, which is sort of oriented on that, which is what was kind of aiming for.
Like the cyber training.
Yeah, exactly. I think also, again, from the US perspective, the thing I probably haven't sort of said is that we're also sort of seeing funding calls for open science. So, for example, we see TOPS in the US, and correspondingly we see things happening at an EU level, and for our colleagues elsewhere in the world, if there are other sort of projects that are similarly going on, funding calls, we'd be delighted to hear about that. I think the one thing just to note is that quite often we had a situation where we do this kind of presentation, and then somebody would say, "Oh, have you thought about reaching out to CZI or Sloan or Gates and so on?" And it's like, yes, we have had those conversations, and they're ongoing, and we're working on that. Is I think the thing just to note.
The obvious big problem is that in the U.S. you have to pay for U.S. people at the most to travel outside the country, and so that's the poor fit. I don't know what I'm doing. If I need to back away from Hugh, maybe stay there, Hugh. So NSF has the AccelNet portfolio under the international. It's not really training though, it's creating networks, but you could say you're creating a network of networks of instructors. But it seems like we need to get into some kind of program that's about international travel, because otherwise, is not afraid of that, because there are other NSF programs where they say don't even include a letter of collaboration from, a foreign entity, because it causes trouble. Include them after. Yeah. But I don't know. Have you cultivated a relationship with the program office, any of the program officers in the International Programs Office? I forget what the title is.
That's the one I'll pass over to Rob on. Rob, do you want to comment on that?
So we have been in contact with several program officers for various different things. PIRE is the solicitation that usually fits us best, and I forget exactly what the PIRE acronym is, but it's a international networks, as you said. I think that we're going along the right lines there, and in the end, it's going to be some set of these piecemeal. Like I said, unless we have a single patron who comes along and says, we'll give you, a few $1 million a year to run this infrastructure, which it doesn't often happen. I hope that does happen, but I have a feeling it's going to be these piecemeal efforts where we put things together for quite some time. Now, one of the other things that we are looking at is Aspen Digital has a program that is an international exchange program that is the U.S., the Middle East, and Northern Africa. So it's a U.S. MENA collaboration, and that is a grant for $900,000, I think, over 2 years. And that would fund some programs, but again, not the entire international program, but a program between researchers and students in the U.S., in Northern Africa, and in the Middle East, which is, that's more international than some of the other things that we've done more recently, like the cyber training program, as you mentioned. So I think that in the end, we can't look for a single funder, right? We can't hope that our patron steps forward and says, I think what you're doing is amazing, I'm going to fund the entire thing. We're going to have to piecemeal together many smaller funding things, which means that projects will start and end, and funding will start and end, and support will start and end at different various times, unless we move to something, as you said, with where there's either a subscription model or a pay model that allows us to charge a certain amount per student. And Hugh, you mentioned that kind of pay model where students go back to their institution. And while that works, I think in high income countries quite well, I think we'll run into the same issues that we do now with countries that don't have the resources. That if the country does not have a good economic standing, then it's going to be hard for them to fund things like students' participation in international schools. So while I like the idea of that for high income countries, low income countries, that's very difficult. And then we're creating a separation again that we're trying to maintain, not creating.
Okay, great. So there's a hand raised by Liz Stokes. So sorry, Liz, I hope you haven't been waiting for too long there.
Not at all. It's totally okay. I hope that I've only been able to write down half my question, so I hope I'm coherent.
Yeah.
Thank you for these overviews of these all of these different models. My question is about whether the CODATA data might consider a kind of
Liz, I think you've been muted. Liz, can you hear us? Okay. Liz, if possible, can you just I'll carry on. We'll carry on, but please jump in if and say, because right now we just can't hear you at the present moment, and so if it's all right, we'll carry on. But please just don't be polite and start talking. We'll get back to you. Okay, so if it's all right, what we're going to do is, I think we're just seeing some points here on the question on additional support from CODATA members. So there's this. So there were some points here. Just reading out the notes. So could CODATA-RDA and ISC do a fundraiser drive amongst international funding organizations, say for 5 years of funding, and develop a network of funders? All right. So I don't know who it was who raised that question. It might have been you, Liz, but did anybody else sort of raise that point and just want to elaborate on that?
I'm not sure if you're actually able to hear me at all doing that.
Okay, great. All right. Oh, great. So Liz, you're there. So yeah. So can you elaborate on the point you kind of got cut off when you were talking? Uh, Ernie, did you raise your hand there? So, Ernie, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Am I on?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, it struck me that this is pretty fundamental to the mission of CODATA, RDA, and ISC. I know that these are not well-funded organizations, but it struck me that they could lead a drive among international um, organizations. I don't know the landscape very well, but I know there are some, and maybe just put together a consortium and do it that way. That's the only thought I have.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's, yeah, I think there are certain things in terms of making that sort of case, and I'm seeing sort of heads nodding as well in terms of sort of doing that at a higher level push. Just to also note something that was mentioned yesterday in Chiamo's talk, Represent Mochwega's talk from AOSP. We are working on a memorandum of understanding with the AOSP. It's still kind of in an early draft phase. Now, AOSP likewise don't have the funds to sort of say, oh yeah, we want to roll out this out. But it's also that more higher level way of higher level shaking of the can is a way of going forward. But I think that's worth thinking about there. So thanks very much for that point, Ernie. So I'm just kind of going to keep an eye on the time. So we've got about 25 minutes left in total here. So there was just the other point there on the CODATA members. So tacking a small surcharge onto national CODATA fees. Yeah, I think that's one thing that's there, but it's I'm not 100% aware of. Christine is raising her hand because I'm sure she's the one who's going to say no, but I think that's limited. So could we pass the microphone over to Christine, please? Thank you.
So I have a little bit of insight since I'm on the XCOM and Secretary General now of CODATA. I think it's not a bad idea, but it's a little fantastical because it just moves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
Simon has to raise membership fees from countries. He has to apply for grants, so he's got to then sell this somewhere. Yeah. And the CODATA budget is not large, and it pays for a small number of FTE and slices of people. And Simon and Hannah do an amazing job, but I would not point you there.
Yeah.
Or if it was going to be incorporated into the larger budget, it would need to come with some work to help help Simon apply for funding.
Yeah.
But I do think that I've seen a change since the school started where, as you mentioned, Hugh, that Simon's transition to really talking about it as a major part of CODATA and one of the programmatic missions. And so I think that's been a very healthy change. And if you, maybe there is some pitch to make to him, but we can't just pass the stress token to him to figure this out.
Yeah, no, I think that I 100% agree on that. So there is a sort of a general principle that I think we've kind of realized is that there's an awful tendency for everybody to look at everybody else and say, well, you guys, you got loads of money, and actually everybody is like, no, we don't have huge sums of money. So that's right. Things, I know in the talk I was a little bit like in-kind support, being a bit wary of that. So for example, I think something that's really important for us is that the administrative support that, for example, the RDA is providing us for us right now is is really good. So that in terms of, and it's important that we've have that support in terms of the people who kind of, you know, that Bridget is sort of understands us and our foibles and the way we organize things and so on. While if we sort of say, oh yeah, you know, we get 6 months support here, and so we'd spend all our time sort of getting people up to speed. On the other hand, I think if they were more sort of shorter term projects that we could fire off to national members, that I think would be something to you know, something that could leverage things. Something that's very clear, and we haven't talked about here, is that we've really only just sort of like started to put together more documentation to sort of make our case. Okay, I think is something that's important. I think also, and I think, so for example, something that I would probably suggest, and again, I'm thinking in a very kind of European sort of way, is, for example, there's EOSC Future and reaching out, you know, in terms of figuring out precisely what's the value add and being able to kind of being able to do that in a very, very sort of slick fashion, so you know, these documents that kind of nice graphics and so on, those would be things that I think we need to generate more of in terms of making our cases and so on. Okay, so let's just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody who's raised a hand here. So I think if it's okay, we've covered the points on discussed project funding and the CODATA members. If it's okay, please.
Let me say one thing. Christine brought up the K through 12 potential, and I think that's important to potentially explore, especially I see that in yesterday's session, the gentleman from NIV from Israel was talking really about starting foundational data science training at a secondary school level. So Christine, I would be very happy to talk to you about the REU opportunity, but I also think that this is someplace that we may be able to have an impact, especially with K through 12 instructors who can then, you know, start teaching these foundational concepts even earlier than we're considering currently. And it may be even more foundational and, you know, a little less boot camp like than the program we have now, but it is a place that I think people are interested now in talking about data science and data in general at much younger ages than they have been previously, as it's really core to almost everybody's life almost all the time.
Okay, sounds good.
So sorry to interrupt you there, but I wanted to talk about that before I lost it.
Yeah, no worries. That's absolutely, that's great. So, if it's all right, maybe, if maybe people might have more questions in terms, more thoughts or things in terms of the project funding and additional support for CODATA members, but maybe could we scroll down, if we could just scroll down a bit to the other points. So the idea, sorry. Yeah. So let's talk about this subscription model and so on. So I know, so for example, Kevin, and thanks very much, Kevin, for making the call today. It's very late for you. Thank you. This is, you know, one idea which I think is potentially viable, and one we really haven't worked on. And I think in particular, it's one that we really need to be able to actually put some time in terms of being able to come up with a really, really concrete case. And in that respect, you know, ultimately the model there is really about funding from high-income countries to subsidize low-income countries. You know, that's it very much in a nutshell. So the challenge is there is that unlike project funding, which is really like, okay, we have a fixed budget that runs for 3 years, or for example, and you know what your budget is. Now you're sort of dependent on you're kind of building up a network of there. And probably one of the things also that we'd have to note is that you need to probably also sort of spend money on paying for somebody who works on that kind of customer relation, that somebody who's kind of continually keeping an eye on that. I think yeah, thanks for that summary there. It would be good if people had thoughts in terms of, if those who are attending here kind of stood back for a moment and kind of, if you're working on an RPO or a HEI and you were approached by an organization like us, corporate social responsibility is a good thing that carries us, but it feels as if there needs to be something more that's there. And I think that's a little bit, that case is less clearly formed. Does anybody here have thoughts about that? So Christine, get past the microphone again. Oh, you got the microphone, great.
I was saving you some trouble.
Yeah.
So I would ask us to, for a minute, forget that we are kind-hearted academics.
Yeah.
Let us be cutthroat business people. So let's not think of it as we're asking people to pay us for something and we're giving them something small back. Let's think of it as we have something to sell to people and they're going to pay us for that. And so here's, and actually this idea of having the higher income country subsidize the lower income ones, I think we've been kicking this around for years, and I still think there's a model here that could work. What I've seen, so I'm at UC San Diego, we have a pretty big and growing data science institute, and then for some reason our universities decided to try and go to 50,000 students. We're at 40,000 and we're like moving up.
Yeah.
And something that and we're very research centric. And something that's really been pushed is how do you provide student experiences, whether those are helping students acquire skills that they can use in their first jobs after college, or where they can apply the knowledge, in internships, right? Things they do during the summer. And these are, it costs money to put these programs on, and more importantly, there is not enough bandwidth at institutions to do this. It often takes a person or a significant part of a person, and they're already too busy, and especially after the pandemic, people are understaffed. Another pressure I'm seeing is that institutions are needing more and more, especially after in the US, 2020, people are wanting to do more with diversity, equity, and inclusion, but something really meaningful that it's not just that they write reports. They need pictures for their reports. They need meaningful things to say. This person worked with this person and here's a real name. So here's my thinking is, what if you could have an institution, or maybe a university, join as a member, and what they get is they have one or a number of slots that can be given to undergraduates or graduate students where they engage as teachers and, I forget what we call them, helpers?
Yeah.
That they're, going to go to one of these schools, and that the institution's covering the travel for that person, and then there's something tacked on that's for the administration of the program.
Yeah.
And then you've got kind of a value proposition.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's something that could be, we could try it out. We could see if my institution would do it. I think another idea would be open up a summer internship for a marketing person from a business school.
Yeah.
Let them run with it and see what they could come up with, or maybe find at one of our institutions if there's an industry relations person that would take an interest to see if they would help put something together and approach some of the current industry partners. And again, the play is, you get to say that you're part of something great happening in a low and middle income country, and it's part of your DEI story.
No, that's. Thanks very much for that, Christine. I know certainly at my institution there's been a big push in terms of finding placements for students, and very often it's, you know, the thing that we're sort of the thing that's finding there is that, yeah, there are placement systems, but often it's the same type of people who already kind of tend to be well networked in, as opposed from students who tend not to engage in that. And it's kind of go, okay, something. So, yeah, there's something there. Yeah, that's something that's you know, that's something I kind of hadn't thought about.
So if
Yeah.
I could add one other idea, so at UC San Diego, one of the, before the Data Science Institute was set up, the Department of Political Science was the first to have a major that included really data science.
Yeah.
And so you have this intersection of people who care about international relations and what's going on in other countries, and also happen to have tons of skills. And they have a heck of a time marketing themselves, as opposed to someone with a computer science or a data science degree. They're always looking for internships, and some of these people would even just help do administrative things remotely, even if they didn't travel. And so there's, I think, I don't know, pent up demand. I don't know if it's helping the right part of the problem, but I think certainly, I'm trying to think of what it's called, the Southern California Seismic something. It's out of Caltech. They have a model like this where institutions pay a subscription fee and offer in kind.
Yeah.
And SDSC just joined, and it was something crazy like, I think we had to say we were going to offer $40,000 of in-kind support, but it turned out basically it was the time that one of our PIs was already giving for free. So
Wow.
it was an easy thing to agree to, but people will do this, and because they want to say they're part of, you know, some important thing. And so I think that'd be part of the marketing, is trying to make it sound like it's not exclusive in a bad way, but this is a premier thing that you want to be a part of. You need to buy into it, and now you're part of this club. I don't know.
Yeah. Did you want to raise it? Did you point to make it? No. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So just have a so behind there. Yeah, just if you can introduce yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann-Kathrin Bernhardt. I'm from Fraunhofer. Some of the things you say, I can imagine working this in the US because students pay fees. So I think your universities they have a lot of more money lying around. I can't really imagine a German university paying or this amount of money for a subscription. But there are, for example, private universities. So if you do it as part, maybe of the curriculum, that you say, okay, you have 2 or 3 weeks where you do those sessions and the content. So this might work, so that you actually provide the students of the private universities who have more money and who can be a bit more relaxed on their schedule. On the other hand, so maybe you should look into, so we have a certification body who are also have an accreditation against ISO standards. So they can give out certificates that are accredited against ISO. And this is what we always feel. So I do data management or data science trainings. And I always feel that this is something that adds value for most, especially companies.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, especially in Germany, they always want certificates.
Yeah.
So they don't care what you did for an internship or anything. You just need a really nice certificate at the end of the day.
Fair enough.
So this might help to look if you can find certification bodies who could go through that process with you.
Yeah.
And just add the value.
Yeah.
And then again, you could also try to go to pharma companies, for example, because they do have a lot of money right now. And you could, propose something like a tandem. So if you have one of your employees, get a training, we will fund like another person from a low or middle income country for training. So as companies do greenwashing, they also do like it's appealing to them. I mean, everyone just currently has like their pride flags up everywhere. So this is working.
Yeah.
If you just go by diversity and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's really, and I think it's just also to note amongst the people, we have about 5 minutes left at this stage, and we have precisely 5 minutes left at this stage. So I know this conversation tends to be very dominated by kind of US and European things. If people kind of want to provide, for example, any of the Korean attendees or Chinese attendees kind of want to look at things from their perspective, that would be great. Please pop them into the notes in terms of things that are there. Just to note, I think it's kind of in terms of the training that we do right now, in some respect, to coin a phrase, I would call the schools as sort of data science skills for the rest of us. All right. So in other words, it's the computer scientists tend to sort of like dominate the data science area, but it's this curriculum is one that's not really set up for them. It's sort of set up for other researchers. So that's it provides, and it's finding that niche to say yes, it's clearly this is something of value, and sort of saying that how would that be to improve a student's employability for if they're attending from a high income country. And I say certification, I think, is definitely a pathway. We also have the data steward instructor training, which is really oriented towards the data stewards who have recently just started into this job. They typically come out with like a PhD in a particular discipline. They're working in an institution, and this is their first sort of job post PhD, and they've been told, okay, you're taking care of all the DMPs for this institution. And I think we have a fairly good model there for in terms of building, adding, presenting something that would add value there. So I think there are, and I think the point, Ernie, the point you're making there, in terms of, and Christine, you're making in terms of being quite cold-hearted about this, I think is an important one. That in some respect, people like Robin, myself, and Louise, who I think is on here as well, when all is said and done, this is kind of the thing we love, all right. But now it's the need, in some respect, to have more people involved who are much more like, okay, who think about it in terms of value add, who think about it in terms of efficiencies as well. So sorry, Christine, you were good. It's behind you.
I just wanted to, I think this is probably too hard to talk about now, but I did want to bring it up. So when Rob and I were on a call with Microsoft, who ended up underwriting one of the schools that will be done this fall in Georgia, but they raised a question that keeps nagging at me, and I think that the price per student is kind of high, and that's something that we're not going to be able to. Well, it's something that we need to think about, because I think when you add up all the costs of what it costs to run a school with all the travel, and then divide it by what the price per student is, and then you say that's like only 2 weeks. It's like, well, some places that would pay for a semester of school. And so I would just challenge us to, I don't know, we need to think on our economic model a bit. I think there's some Achilles heels in it. I don't know what idiom to use. But
no, that's a fair point. And just thinking on the fly there, it's for schools, we often try and run try and get as many local instructors. But perhaps what we need to do is think about things where, you don't have external instructors, but for example, if they provide online things, they do things in a sort of hybrid mode or something like that. Rob, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add in there on that.
No, sorry, I dropped something here on my desk.
He
Don't
was
worry.
angry. Stop saying stuff like that, Christine.
No, I mean it's I think it's worth kind of
So,
yeah. Sorry, yeah.
so I will say that we've talked about this model of offering this to for pay participants, and we may want to think, since hybrid has become so much of a word, a hybrid model where we do what we do in Trieste or Rwanda or Sao Paulo normally, but we ask the local institution to reserve 5 seats or 10 seats that we can then sell to whoever's buying for a somewhat industry like standard. So rather than doing a full event where we do everyone purchase, do an event like have Trieste and ask the ICTP to reserve 5 seats that we want to sell to Italian companies who may be interested in having employees who learn some foundational data science skills, and see if we can raise some money in a hybrid fashion rather than going all in necessarily on a paid participant school. So just one of those ideas that allows us to kind of dip our toes into seeing what this is like as a participant funding themselves type program before we go all the way in and try to run an event that may or may not be successful.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's all right, it's 4 minutes to the hour, and if it's okay, we're going to wrap it up at this stage. First of all, thank you very much. I mean, thank you all so much for the comments that are here. They're really helpful. And thanks also. Please make sure you put your names down in there. If you have other ideas and so on, please pop them into the chat. There's plenty of food for thought here. So with that, we'll wrap up at this stage. It's a good morning, good evening, and good night, and thank you all for attending. Thanks very much. Cheerio. Bye bye.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
No worries.
One of
Rob.
the only sessions I get up and be at 8:30.
Can we have that as like our tagline for the next time we do this? All right.
So, Christine, I'm replying to you in the chat, but I see that you're already packing up. We are considering stipends for instructors, and in fact, in Trieste now, instructors do get stipends, and the recent proposals we put in do consider the instructors getting some sort of stipend for their time and not doing this completely on a donation basis. Now, that's hard for people who have full-time jobs, because if that gets to be too much, it's a potential conflict of interest. You get into financial issues with pay, I know, but we are considering both, and in fact, the recent cyber training proposal considers the students' time also, right? The participants need to be paid for their summertime, because a lot of them use the summer to work to fund their other endeavors in school. So I think we do always have to consider going forward both the instructor's time and the participants' time. Just wanted to say that because I typed it in. I said it in a much shorter version in chat, but I did put it in chat.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Bye. Enjoy the plenary.
Okay, take care. All right. Bye to the rest of you guys. Why am yeah, bye. All right. Bye-bye.